Okay guys, this is going to be tutorial number 3 in the Wave Shooter tutorial series. We're going to be adding Bloom and some basic enemy AI functionality built into the game. It's not going to be, the enemies aren't going to be complete in this tutorial, but we're going to be setting up the base for the enemies. So first let's do the Bloom. We're going to add a environment, world environment. Technically it's not Bloom, it's called Glow on Godot, so I'll call it Glow or Bloom. Basically, it's basically the same thing to me. So add a new environment, go to background, we're gonna do canvas, now go down to Glow, enable Glow. The only thing we're gonna change is the Bloom value. We're gonna set that to 0.15. These are the values I found work best, but you might do something way different, which is just fine. I'm gonna set it to additive instead of soft light, and then you're gonna turn on bicubic upscale. And bicubic upscale basically just smooths the gradient a lot nicer. So we have the basic Bloom effect, very easy to achieve. It's a lot like post-processing kind of stuff. So I'm going to save it and we're going to be working on our enemy. So press the plus button, we're going to be adding a sprite as our enemy, and we're going to drag our square into the texture. We're also going to set the scale to the same scale as our player, so 1.5 by 1.5. And I'm going to set the visibility, I'm going to set that to like a reddish, pinkish kind of color. It feels a lot more vibrant. And we're going to name this to enemy. We're going to save it with Control S, press save, and we're going to add an enemy script and press create. Okay, so speed, we're going to have to experiment with this value a little bit. I'm going to go with 100 and just have it at 100. I think that will work best. We'll figure that out later though. We're going to set a velocity vector, and that's all we need for now. We're going to be setting our process function, and here's another thing we need. We're going to have an enemy that moves towards the player, but it needs to have a reference to the player. And so remember in the last tutorial, we did a node creation parent. That's our reference. Well, we can do the same for the player. Var player equals null. Now go into player script, and we're going to do the same thing as we did before, where we have function underscore ready global.player equals self, and function exit tree. Now remember, exit tree is when it leaves the node tree or gets destroyed. Let me set it back to null. So now it can reference the player through this global scope. So now the enemy is going to be like, okay, if global.player is not equal to null, meaning that it exists, then we're going to move towards it. So velocity equals global position dot direction to global dot player dot global position. Okay, so this is basically setting our velocity to get the direction to our player position. And now our velocity is going to be angled and set accordingly from their position to the player's position. And we could do global position plus equals velocity multiplied by speed multiplied by delta. And we actually have to add our global position because we're just setting the velocity variable up here, which is not going to cause any movement. And because that's just a variable and it's not being used. And then when we get to this line, it's used, and we multiply it by speed and by delta, so it runs the same speed on all devices. So we have our enemy, and he sets his velocity to the player. So we can save that, and let's put some enemies into the scene and run it and see how this goes. So I'm gonna add an enemy. We're gonna move it over closer to the player. I'm gonna save it, and we're gonna run. You can see that we have an enemy now. He moves towards the player. He does not react to bullets though. So we're gonna fix that. But moves towards the player pretty well. I would probably set the speed maybe a little bit lower, maybe 75. Maybe that's good. Okay, so now we need to check if it gets hit by a bullet. And to do a check if an object overlaps another one, we're gonna be using areas. And so these areas will be able to overlap each other, and it calls out a signal when another area is overlapping with it. So we're going to be setting an enemy, and we're going to be running an area 2D. It's going to be our hitbox, and we're going to be setting a collision shape under our area, which basically gives the shape of the area. And so I'm going to set the shape. I'm going to turn on use pixel snap, and I'm going to set it so it's kind of the size of the enemy. There you go. So I'm going to toggle visibility so I don't see it, and I'm going to rename this area to hitbox. And we're going to connect this hitbox area entered, and we're going to connect it to the enemy. So now this is a signal, because you can see right here, that's the signal icon, and it's a signal from the hitbox right here. We're connecting this signal back to the enemy. So now it checks if an area is colliding with our area, we get this area argument. And so it gets the area of the overlapping area. So when this area is hitting another one, it will know what that other area is that we're overlapping, which is what we're going to be using to detect what area we are overlapping. Now, I've never said area so much times in my life. Okay, so don't need to set up an empty scene. We need to go into the bullet, TSCN, and we're going to add an area. If it will add area, and we're going to add a collision shape to it. So now we have a collision shape under our area, and I'm just going to set it to, not a raycast, a rectangle. And again, I'm going to use pixel snap, so it snaps to each pixel so I can easily resize it. And that other thing that's below this area that you're seeing is the visibility notifier. Now I'm just going to turn off the visibility on that area. Now I'm going to rename this to hitbox, and I'm going to add a group to this node. This is how we're going to identify which area is which. So in this group, we're going to be using enemy damager. So that's the group under the hitbox. Make sure it's under the hitbox because that's how we're going to detect it. Now we're going to go back to our enemy, go back to our enemy script, and we have a function that we can use, if area.is in group. We're going to call it enemy damager. So if we are colliding with an enemy damager, now we know that we're colliding with it. We're going to do area.getParents.queueFree. So we destroy that node, the bullet node. Reason why we have to do get parent is right now we're just getting this hitbox. So if we just deleted the hitbox, if we just did queue free, it'd destroy the hitbox. But we want to destroy the entire bullet. So we have to do get parent, which gets the node above the hitbox, which is the bullet, and destroys it. So I'm going back into the enemy script, and we're going to have that at the very bottom. We probably want to give some visual feedback that the enemy's been hit. So we're going to be sending our color, well, not our modulate, which is our color of our sprite, equals color 1, 1, 1. Or you could just say color dot white. I think that's easier to see. So now it sets our modulate to a white color. What's going to happen though is you're going to hit, let me just show you. I'm going to save everything and run the arena, sorry. And I'm going to shoot an enemy and he's going to stay white. And we need to have a stun stage where the enemy is hit and it has some knockback and it gets stunned. So to do this, we're going to add a timer. And I'm just going to call it stun timer. And we're going to set it to like 0.1. And we'll do one shot. So only happens once. So I'm going to connect the signal timeout, connect that back to the enemy. So now we have our stun timer connected. So now we're going to call our stun timer. So $, because that gets the nodes that are below this node, stun timer dot start. So now we're starting that stun timer. And when it goes out, we want to set our modulate back to our original color. So I need to get our original color. So go back to 2D, go to enemy, inspector. We want to grab our modulate. And I'm just going to copy this hex code. And I'm going to go to script. I'm going to set color. Then you're going to do string and put in the hex code. It's going to set it back to its normal color. So we can test this by saving the enemy, going back to the arena scene, and running it. When I hit him, see it turns white, and my bullets are getting destroyed by him. It's pretty neat, but now we need to make sure that the enemy, when he's stunned, he can't take damage again, because right now he can get stunned and then take damage, even though we don't have a damage variable set, he still turns white. So we're going to make a variable called var stun. We're going to set it to false with one equal sign that's only You only do 2 equal signs when you're checking if it's equal to something. If you want to set it, you have to use 1. And if player is not equal to null and stun is equal to false, then we can move towards the player. Here, let me back up a bit. We're checking if the player is not equal to null, meaning the player exists and stun is equal to false. Then we move towards the player. So we need to set that variable to true when we do get hit. Under this modulate, we're going to do stun equals true. And in the stun timer, we're going to set it back to false after the stun timer goes off. And now we can run our game. And when we shoot an enemy, it's gonna stop for a second. At least he should. Oh, his velocity never gets set back to 0 at 0. So he'll keep moving because his velocity is just his previous velocity. So what we can do, well, let's set up knockback, because our system with knockback is actually gonna set up the velocity accordingly. For a knockback, we're gonna do, when we get hit, we're gonna do velocity equals negative velocity multiplied by 4. So now it's setting our velocity to a negative, and if we can test that and see how well that works. It's not going to be our full knockback, but you see we do have a pretty good effect when he gets hit. He juts pretty fast though when you hit him back, and so what we can do is when he's not stunned, and do if, we're going to do an else if he is stunned, then we could do velocity equals lerp, velocity, we're going to do vector 2, 0, 0, and 0.3 for the weight. What this does is lerp interpolates a variable. So we're interpolating the velocity variable from its current value, which is this value, from its current velocity value, and we're going to move it to velocity 0, 0 at this speed, or like percentage. So like 30%, we're going to move it back. And so that will give us a smoother knockback effect when we hit him. See, that's a lot smoother. So now we have knockback incorporated, but I think I want to set our stun timer a little bit longer. Set to 0.25. But now we need to have it so he has HP. So we're going to be setting our variable HP. We'll set that to 3. I think 3 sounds good. And when he gets hit by a bullet, we want to subtract HP minus equals 1. Now in the process, now we need to check if HP is less than or equal to 0. So we're going to do that here. If it's less than or equal to 0, then we are basically just going to queue free for now. We're going to be adding a lot more code in the HP right here, where the enemy is going to create kind of like an explosion when they die. And that'll make the game a lot more fun. But for now, we just have that. And I'm regretting setting this timer. I think I'm just going to set it back to 0.1. I shouldn't have changed that. Okay, so I'm going to set the speed a little bit higher. Actually, no, let's leave the speed the same. We're going to set our velocity. This is kind of like our multiplier effect of knockback. We're going to set that a bit higher so it gets knocked back more. There you go. So you have the effect more apparent. And there you have it. We have basic enemy AI that moves towards you and you can shoot them. Right now we have to manually set up the enemies into the scene, but later we're going to have an enemy spawn timer, and we're going to be like integrating multiple enemy types, difficulty system in the timer, and all of this different stuff. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.